All right, beautiful humans, welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have my new friend, Chuck Copenspire. Make sure I'm saying that last name
Got it.
correctly. I
Mhm.
hate saying last names improperly or names in general improperly. Name, maybe because people always stumble over my name when I was younger, but I didn't really care. People can call me asshole. It doesn't bother me anyway. Um, Thank you for joining me on the show today.
Definitely. Very happy to be here.
It's a party. And I don't know if you listen to the episodes, but what I like to start off all my episodes with, of all the things, I have really no structure, but the one thing I like to start with is I like to tell my guests why I appreciate them. This
Oh,
is my small, gentle effort in an effort towards moving towards the thing I like to call world peace. Maybe if we started focusing on why we appreciate each other more, things might work out a little bit better.
mhm.
So, to that effect, I just love how our conversation just sparked out of a little bit of curiosity. Like you just reached out to me, like not like how most people reach out on the social medias, where
Mhm.
they drop in, try to pitch you on some random shit and whatever. Is like just like kindness and curiosity, and even our conversation is warm, open minded, just like, hey, let's get to know each other. Into we were just talking about this before we hopped on, like, do I always have to be selling up? Like, where you live in a day and age where everybody has to be on and like it has to be for something other than let's just see where this goes. I don't know. And having no agenda and no preconceived notions about what it has to be, I've always found lends itself to better relationships, better communication, hell, more fun in
Mhm.
general. So I really appreciate that about you. And thank you for just being that.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that that's working because sometimes I feel self-conscious that I'm not, as sharky as some of the other people in the space. But
Mm.
I think it's true that at the end of the day, my business is really it hinges on good relationships, and I'm glad that that's coming through. And I'm not in the sea of sharks with the rest of them.
The sea of shit's wild out there. I mean,
Mhm.
I was just talking about my buddy yesterday. Doesn't matter the platform, all of them just dropping into your DMs and you get a paragraph of like, sign up for my shit right now. And I'm like, yo, buy me coffee first, buy me a drink, like that kind of idea. Like, where's the dating in all of this?
That's what I keep saying. It's a dating analogy. It's like if someone just like showed up in your Tinder like day one and was like, here's my salary, here's everything about my physical health, here are my dreams and goals. Do you want to get married? Yes or no? Click this Zoom link if you would like to book a marriage meeting. It's like there is no inherent curiosity because they do make you feel like a number. Like you just know they sent that to like 40 girls. Um,
Boom,
you
just
know,
like that.
uh, yeah. So there's like, I don't know if you experienced this, but I was just laughing with another marketer that people show up in my DMs and try to sell me the services that I provide. I'm like, did you even look at anything? Or did you just see this is a business owner? I'm going to fire it off.
That happens so much. I laugh, especially since you brought up the you want to get married thing. I was supposed to have an arranged marriage.
Oh, what?
And yeah, oh, we can dive all into that
Uh huh.
if you'd like. But I've used that analogy like in all instances, except for this one. Like, yeah, you like who in their right mind gets married day one? Now, we could there could be arguments of saying historically, arranged marriages have worked in depending on what you were defining success as. But by and large, especially if you're looking to have a deep, meaningful, enriching relationship where there's inherent trust, get to know each other first. Don't just sell people the moon. And it's the overpromise, underdeliver thing that happens everywhere in the online space. Hell, I mean, happens in the in-person space. It's like almost like people don't even know how to talk to each other in any way, shape, or form nowadays. So like that's where it steps out and becomes like a breath of fresh air for somebody who's just like, you can talk like a human. Part of me is like, that's really sad that the threshold is so damn low. But there is an the flip side is like, wow, anybody who just is willing to slow down, which again you were talking about earlier, like I'm giving myself permission to slow down, take some time. If you have the courage to do that, you're just going counter current. It makes it pretty easy to stand out. You're like, oh, so this is a different relationship. Cool. I'm curious. You're not trying to jam some product down my throat. Tell me more. Like that's it seems weird. You're letting go of control, but
But
long
yeah, I
term.
think I think there's something like inherent almost in that like energy signature that you're putting out when you're not just like showing up and being like, hand over your wallet, please. Like if you're well, and I've always found, I think in general, I'm a deeply curious person. Like I just want to know things, and I want to know things about other people's experiences. And yeah, I feel like I talk about this with my like in-laws a lot. They're in their 70s and they're the most like playful, interesting, cool people ever, which is why I moved across the entire country to be near them. But
Wow.
I always say like they don't have their mind made up about anything. They
Mm.
don't claim to know anything for sure, and they always are curious what can add to what they've experienced so far, as opposed to just being like, well, this is how it is and it'll never change. And I think that keeps you young, it keeps you feeling good, and it builds good relationships.
Well, especially what you're saying, like as you people get older, people still get a little more stuck in their ways. But I think the openness to challenge your thoughts, no matter where you're at in life, is a valuable thing because one of two things will happen. Either you become more confident in what you previously believed, or
Mm-hmm.
you now become more confident in yourself as, in general because now you have a broader foundation of knowledge. It's
Mm-hmm.
a win-win if you're willing to just say, I'm willing to say I don't know for a little bit. Let me go down this ride for a moment. Kudos to you for moving across the entire country like that. That's a baller move just as part of one of those reasons. But I might make the title of this episode energy signature. What's your energy signature? In fact, yeah, I'm almost certain I love that. I don't know why that hit real nice
We
for
could
me.
talk all about that if you want to, for sure. But
Shit, yeah. Well, before we go into that, let's do this.
Mhm.
You know yourself better than I.
Mhm.
Please share with the audience, who are you?
Well, I am Chuck Copenspire. I am the anti-professional professional, as it says in some of my bios. But what that really means is I'm a person who is in the online marketing space, who's trying to challenge assumptions, who is trying to carve new paths for people who have been traditionally underrepresented in entrepreneurship and business. And I'm just trying to solve problems and make the world suck less on the internet, basically.
Oh god, that's I've been very on brand with anti-professional professional. Make things suck less.
Mhm.
I gotta imagine you attract a lot of clients who love good sarcasm because
Mhm.
you got to be able to hang, and it almost lends itself to an idea that like if everything's a joke, you can never be offended, which I think is super powerful
Mhm.
right now, and especially in the not even just online space, in business in general. If you're going to own your own business, better you better get ready to be rejected a lot.
Mhm. Right.
And if you could laugh it off and just like, cool, on to the next one, you're going to do a lot better in life. So,
That's why sometimes I challenge people to be stupid on purpose, because then if people tell you you're stupid, you can say, I know. That was the point. So that's why sometimes I, will make goofy stuff or like do things that I know aren't going to go viral, but they really do hit with like my core audience who's like, yeah, fuck the algorithm, like do what you want, like wear a clown nose and prance around and like tell people to do something. I think people like it when you don't follow the rules. And people are super mean to me online all the time, but what are they doing? Are they my peers? Are they my clients? They're not. They're just somebody. I call them like emotionally constipated or creatively constipated people who don't like to watch someone else do something they wish they could do.
mm,
That's at least what I tell myself and how I cope. But sometimes I just don't get on the internet for a few days when something goes viral, because usually the comments aren't very nice.
ooh, I can only imagine. Yeah, negativity like that just I mean, sometimes I've seen a few people like they respond to it with like, "Oh, tell me more." Like the
Mm-hmm.
same idea, but granted, we live in a day and age where especially if something goes viral,
Mm-hmm.
thousands upon thousands upon thousands, if not millions of people potentially responding negatively to you,
Mm-hmm.
that's like a fire hose of pain, I guess, pointed directly at you. And you better be like, I don't know if the human psyche is capable of truly handling that if you put your attention to it and you allow it to like into your energy.
I have tried that before where I have had some curiosity, and I found that when it's one person on a not viral post, it's easy to show up for that. But when it is thousands of people being mean, especially if it's like transphobic stuff or like just obviously like baiting me to try to, I guess, discourage me from showing up online.
Hmm.
I've taken some advice from other people who show up like I do, and they say just ignore it. some people delete every single one of those comments. I don't even want to have that kind of energy exchange. I just sort of try to move on.
Well, you'd
Uh,
still have to read stuff and then digest it. Do I
mhm.
want to delete this or not delete this? It's like just saying I'm going to keep ripping at a scab like over and over again just because of whatever thing. Interesting. Wow. Tell me a little about the energy stuff, because now, I mean, you piqued the curiosity. Obviously, we're kind of talking about energy management here, dealing with negativity and stuff like that, but more of a global thing. Like, where did you take that piece when I brought that up?
Yeah, when you mentioned an energy signature, it made me think about how I think in a small way I've been trying to cultivate um, like a presence of being within myself for a long time. And I would say
Mm,
it probably started back with my Christian roots. And then I've sort of explored more into like Taoism, Buddhism, sort of the fractal, psychedelic, whatever brand of spirituality we want to call that. And I found that, what would I call it? Focused attention, giving people my full attention and really listening to them, and trying to emanate sort of like a feeling of safety.
mm,
Uh, I find that tends to do a lot for building community, for bringing in friends. I try to almost be like a beacon of presence.
mm,
There's something in I think in that they described with Christ called the gaze of mercy, and that was
mm,
where he was just like with you, and he like made you feel like you actually mattered just by looking at you like he cared. And
mm,
so for better or worse, I tend to do that. And so sometimes sometimes people will sit down and tell me everything,
mm.
which is very interesting. Like people tend to pour it all out, regardless of whether or not I've asked for it. So I'm very careful about who I make eye contact with at the bus stop now, because like I'm not always in the space to hear everything. And people have lived through a lot. So, I think I sometimes have to close up my energy signature, because it does, when I'm like in the space, I like to be welcoming, but then I have to like shut it off if I'm not in the space to receive all of that, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think underwriting all of that, I hope there's some insight for a lot of people. I tend to be very similar to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
People will tell me their life story. I met them 5 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, half the time I was on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks to a deep seated loneliness in humanity right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have all this connection, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not really connecting. We don't feel seen and heard. We don't feel like somebody's willing to make time to sit down and open that space up. And
Mm-hmm.
the second there's a glimpse of like acknowledgement, and I do believe what you brought out there, making eye contact, as silly as it sounds, like making eye contact with somebody at the bus stop, and that happens all the time in the grocery store, the checkout line, the whatever the thing, to really look at somebody and then ask a kind question or something that opens the door. People are like, I don't know why I'm telling you this stuff, but that, especially if you're empathetic or you feel very deeply about anything and you maybe carry that stuff after you, that's a difficult burden to bear at times.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
What's interesting is I read this really great book, maybe 10 years ago now, called Self-Care for the Self-Aware. And
Mm,
the writer, Dave Markowitz, has this thing called the keyhole method. And the keyhole method is where when a person is sort of, sending some energy your way, that is overwhelming, and you're a very empathetic person, you can
mm,
sort of like create a hole in your energy for the thing to pass through, so you can hold it and witness it as it's with you, but it doesn't stick to you. Because I used to identify as a person who like held on to everyone's stuff, and then I almost did like a like cleaning out my garage, sort of, where I was like, well, this isn't mine and this isn't mine. And then he has exercises for sending all those things back to other people.
mm,
And so I've found it's like really helpful for me just to have those visualizations of like I'm witnessing this, but I'm not taking it on.
mm.
And that helps me have more space, I think.
Did you ever read, every time I want to refer to it, what's it called? The Untethered Soul?
No, I think
Michael
I've heard of it.
Michael Singer. What you brought up made me think about that, where he talks about becoming the observer, I am
Mm.
one of the kind of the associations, like you cut your arm off, like, is that no longer you? And then he kind of walks it back a little bit. You feel these things. Are you your feelings?
Mhm.
No. And then it comes back a little bit farther. Like you are the consciousness observing those feelings.
Mhm.
What you were bringing out there reminded me of that same vein of how do you step away and detach from what's in front of you, but still hold the space at the same time.
Mhm.
I think a lot of that is as coaching, because there's a lot of transference within the coaching or the
Mm.
service industries where many people find that, and when I've observed it, it ends up being that session was more about the coach or the provider. It was more about them as
Mm.
opposed to the idea that it was about the other person. I think that comes with this, you call it trauma bonding or something like that. Um, I think you'd find it interesting. That's why I asked. It's like, oh, have you got some parallel stuff there?
Mhm.
Wow. I'm curious. You brought up a pretty broad religious exploration. What?
Mhm.
Tell me, take me on that journey. How do we get there?
Yeah, well, so I grew up very Methodist. Like in every church play, in every singing production is where I learned to sing. It's where I learned that I love singing. I still am obsessed with honestly like Christian music and gospel, and like really like revelry through song is like very important to me.
Hmm.
Um, but around the time maybe that I started understanding that I was queer, I started feeling really challenged with my relationship with the church, and I tried to be honest, but my Methodist church was a really judgmental space. Like you would get in trouble for yawning, you would get in trouble for praying wrong. There were a lot of like really invisible boundaries where I just started to realize that I wasn't very welcome there. And so I sort of like bipped around a little bit. Early days of the internet, I started researching. I think I started researching like Sikhism, and found my way to Buddhism, which was helpful for me to start beginning that witnessing journey of that sort of, I would say Buddhism doesn't really discuss non-duality as much as some other things, but I think Buddhism is really about non-duality and non-judgment. Like there is no good or bad, there just is what is. So I practiced Buddhism for a while. I even went on a journey of like denying pleasure and doing ascetic Buddhism, and like, complete dopamine withdrawals before that was a thing, or dopamine fasting before that was a thing. And yet went on a whole journey with that. And in recent years, found myself in more of like the witchy magical space, which my mom is really into. And I grew up with, spells and crystals and fairies and dream journals and Reiki and all of that. Kind of found my way back to it through festivals and like meeting these crystal people again and fairy people again, and just sort of getting in touch with my inner like conjurer or wizard, and really working on building that energy signature and trying to awaken that in the people around me so that they can realize that they all have the power to sort of conjure at least what's in their immediate vicinity and to cultivate things that will build their dream life over time.
Hmm.
Still considering global oppression and forces and all of that, but acknowledging what we can affect, and trying to have our butterfly effect be very effective. Um, and so songwriting and poetry and speaking has been a big part of that journey for me as well. I'm actually getting a tattoo today about my relationship with that. The tattoo is I am a bearer, I am a witness, I am a dwelling. And
Hmm.
it's about a magician who can't control when the magic moves through him, but when it does, he can do magic.
Hmm.
And that's how I feel about 90% of my existence, honestly. It's just that I'm an instrument for whatever needs to be here.
Hmm. Appreciate you sharing that. So in I'm hearing many
That's a lot, I
parallels.
know.
Oh, I'm here for it.
Mhm.
The parallels of, what's the word? The spiritual journey is the best
Mhm.
way I could describe it. Um, I'm finding this is far more common than I understood when I was younger. So I appreciate you sharing a lot of that. And a lot of stuff gets caught up in like woo woo, like, oh, there's nothing grounded to it. But finding a way to bring it back to practicality and things like that is the manifestation of it, the presence of this deeper seated thing. And
Mhm.
there's it sounds like there's so many people that are just seeking. I think right now, I've shared this a few times. Like, I don't. Everybody talks about there's a mental health crisis. There's even a physical health crisis, but I
Mhm.
think that those are symptoms. I don't think that those are the root. I think the root is there's essentially a spiritual health crisis. Like, we don't know. We've lost a connection to something bigger than ourselves, and there's not an openness. There's all rejection because our, we'll call it our forefathers, the past religious dogmas, hyper
Mhm.
strict, hyper good, bad, like the
Mhm.
all those things you brought out there, and often um, delivered under shame and guilt tactics, as opposed to the openness and curiosity that I was hearing in your own journey. And the more you explore, the more I'm coming to find, I'm curious to hear some of your stuff, is like most of these different paths are kind of trying to say the same thing. If you
Mhm.
really like cut out all the excess, and there's some different, like you said, like, oh, I did my own version of detoxes. Well, that's kind of a
Mhm.
restrictive thing. In other faiths, there's like Lent, and there's other fasts, and there's other rigid things. But when it's more of a, I'm going to assume it was um, self-driven. It
Mhm.
wasn't because somebody else told you. It's because I'm feeling called to do something. This happens to be a path that I'm aware of right now that seems to align with what I need.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to go down this path. It's not even so much what the thing is, call it a dopamine withdrawal, whatever.
Mhm.
You're going to fast from food for a week, which I've done, but like, they're kind of the same thing. It's not a matter of like, why are those specific things so good for you physiologically or whatever. It's more, what do you learn about yourself and your own deeper understanding of things greater than yourself in the
Mhm.
process? And you don't know. It's, as you said before, hey, I don't know. I'm
Mhm.
playing stupid. I don't know, but I'm going to go on this journey. I am of my own volition
Mhm.
hitting the I believe button, that I believe I'm going to learn something meaningful to it. So that's what I was taking away from your story there, that I think if anything anybody takes from that part, it's like being open-minded and seeing, probably more often than not, like the similarities in a lot of these things. You might land on something. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about the I don't know, I know almost nothing about the like witchy stuff.
Mhm.
So all of
Yeah.
it, please share. I'm very curious. I don't know jack shit about it. I've had 3 people tell me about it, and
Mhm.
that's surface level understanding. But um yeah, I hear that thread
Mhm.
more often than I ever anticipated.
The thread of going from strictness to like a self-guided journey through mm, like finding your way to being non-judgmental or even just like experimenting with different practices.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, did you have something?
No, I'm listening.
The thing I wanted to say about that is I'm a very hypothesis oriented person. I love to develop a hypothesis, collect data, and then move on from there. And so a lot of my spiritual stuff has been hypothesis based. Like, what would happen if I forego this thing for a month? What would happen if I tried this for a month? What would happen if I think something that kind of with the like witchy magic manifestation stuff is just a hypothesis. There's something I read about 2 years ago called scripting, and it's where you write in a journal as if you're writing from the future, and you say, "I'm so grateful that my coaching practice passed 6 figures this year. It was really wonderful to see my website bring in new visitors and to connect with people who I never expected to connect with." And when I started doing that, specifically around income, I started making so much more money. Like the first year, my goal was 80K. I made, I think, 120. Like and I was at zero. I was unemployed during the pandemic with a newborn by myself. And by the end of that year, I crossed 6 figures. And so I think what we all hear that thing like thoughts become beliefs, beliefs become actions, actions become habits. I think the core of magic is really just believing that something is possible. And then when you believe it, you start to take different steps. You literally walk differently. You literally bring different things into your world. And so manifestation is almost just facilitating this reality that you want to exist by calling things in, but also being open to unexpected things coming your way and seeing them as an opportunity or a resource that you might not have expected. I actually have a spell about it that it's only 4 lines if you want to hear it, but
Yeah.
um,
Hey,
okay,
Snake and Sunday. Let's go. Let's
yeah.
go.
So it's called Serendipity, and it's a spell that I sing to myself when I want to bring in things. It goes, Serendipity, won't you come for me? Opportunities come too. Darling, you may not be looking for me, but I'm on my way to you. And yeah, it's about like the
Yeah.
absurdity of chance and just calling in resources and opportunities.
I actually have recently been gently dipping my toe in the water around understanding music a little more from the spiritual sense and like frequencies and stuff like that. What does it mean?
Mhm.
And again, this is like quick Google search, whatever. Nothing, excuse me, nothing formal. But I did hear something the other day about um, a guy was talking about becoming a better speaker.
Mm.
And he said the average speech or something like that is the same amount of words as the average song. But why can't you remember a speech word for word? Well, why do you remember a song? It's because you have a melody to go along with the words, and it casts that into, and of course if you dive into the other stuff, which I don't know anything about, I'm assuming there's layers, but I think that that's fun. And I actually think that lends itself to the idea of why entertainment can be so powerful,
Mm.
because I mean, I think about just even binge watching a show. By the way, I loved your song, that was cool.
Thank you.
I like that gospely undertone in music. I think that's always cool, especially when it's blended through genres. I think that's always fun. Um, but if somebody just watches the same show over and over, they could recite the lines. It's almost like they could act out the thing. They become the characters.
Mhm.
It's speaking to that and using those layers from we take it out of the whatever somebody might see the dogma of like, oh, it's witchy or it's this or it's that. But like a lot of cultures, what do they use? They make songs. They make
Mhm.
songs to imbue the message that they're coming with. So I thought that was really cool that you've done that. And you said this is recent or past couple of years. Like, how's that been going, or how long has it?
Well, I started writing songs and poems about 10 years ago, and I think I started writing spells maybe 5 years ago. I'm actually maybe 2 weeks away from publishing my first book of poetry. Very,
Hey,
very close. Finalizing the manuscript this week, which is exciting. Um, but
congratulations. That's cool. Very cool.
but I think it was part of that opening practice, as I described about becoming sort of an instrument for things to move through, because I really feel in a way that the songs don't belong to me. They're sort of for the people who need to hear them, and so that's why I go to open mics and I put them on social media. Is not necessarily because I want the credit, but it's because I have a faithful feeling that the words are for someone, which is why actually up until now I haven't formally recorded anything. Everything has always been by chance. If you catch it in person, then you get it. But for whatever reason, it feels like it's ready to move into something a little different now. So I'm hosting an open mic in my hometown, or not my hometown, the town I just moved to, because there was no open mic for poets. Um, and so I'm excited to be calling that in and getting to share the stuff with the community very soon. But yeah, it's I don't know, my creative practice is really intuitive. Sometimes I paint, sometimes I draw, sometimes I sing, and I just kind of negotiate with I always say creativity and entropy. Try to make those two come together and see what they want to do.
For a long time, I did not appreciate let's call it art.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was like you either paint or you sing or those types of things. For the record, that's my father's artwork in the back. We actually built that
Oh,
together. Um,
wow.
I have a deep. I always saw it. I know when I see something, I'm like, I like that. That connects with me on a, we'll call it a primal level.
Mm-hmm.
But in my own journey, it was like jock, good student, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
To dip into that would not fit into what I thought my narrative was supposed to be and how to do
Mhm.
that. And that was, I see now how much of not integrating a creative practice. I came up with my own things along the way, but I see, if anything, there was a lot of envy of like, why can't I also express this softness, this flowy, perhaps even undefined? It's like, it's different than saying like, here, I'm going to sell you this mug. Like you get what you're getting, very practical, like cool, it holds your fluid and you're going to drink the thing. I mean, technically this would be art because it's some silly stuff from Ted Lasso, which I love.
Mhm.
Um, but from a practical sense, just a mug, like here you go. The art, the feeling that something makes you, mm, didn't understand that. Didn't
Mm.
understand that. But you said that that's been something just part of your life forever.
Yeah, I guess like to go a little further back, I've just always had an experience of being sort of an outsider. I was really not well liked as a child. I was like physically and verbally bullied a lot and really pushed away from people. So I spent a lot of time alone.
Mm.
And in that time alone, I drew a lot and I read a lot. And so there was so much of my experience was of trying to make sense of a lot of bad things that happened to me on my own. And I think sometimes I just draw when I'm anxious or write when I'm anxious. When it, is welling up in my body, I just need to get it out of my hands in a way, or out of my mind. But I think that I always had access to that channel. And my mom really cultivated that in me, and I've been cultivating it in my daughter. And she is a 3-year-old who writes her own songs and is a cartoonist now. So it's really exciting to get to share that support with her and see whatever she's going to make. But yeah, I feel like in the darkest times, creativity has been there for me, and the times that I was really lost and really on the edge, I could write a song to save myself. And so now that I'm back from the edge, I feel like those things that saved me are hopefully going to help other people. And that's why I do like to write about the hard times and the hard emotions that are very difficult to talk about. I wrote a song called 33 Reasons Not to Delete Yourself. And it's 33 reasons I specifically chose not to, including like the third season of Rick and Morty, or like really, really wanting to try this new food that was coming out, or I planted some seeds and I wanted to see what would happen. So it's about like the minute reasons to stay around. And I guess maybe part of it is finding those resources throughout my life that were helpful to me. I just want to add to that pile of resources for people who are struggling, because I know that suffering very well, and I would like to reduce it, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And finding a lot of parallels with people, like a lot of loneliness in their earlier life. Also, in many ways, imbues them with the skills because of the journey that they go on.
Mm-hmm.
To
Yeah,
then
10,000 hours. I definitely spent that much time drawing.
maybe more,
Mm-hmm.
probably more, but those things make you the expert to hold the space, as you were talking about. Like if you're not solid as you welcome in, if you're opening a business, like you need to welcome in clients that are going to come with their own set of shit. They're
Mm-hmm.
gonna, like, half the time it's never, I've yet to find a reason where it's a knowledge problem that's
Mm-hmm.
what's actually holding them back from building their business, losing the weight, having a better marriage, whatever it is. It's always a, this is this other thing that I'm working through that's still speaking itself into existence in the current day. How do I make peace with that? And if you're going to somebody who's not solid, who hasn't essentially walked into the darkness themselves
Mm-hmm.
and been willing to sit in that very uncomfortable, often lonely, often very undefined space, and then know how to come out and say like, cool, I can hold that space for you without dropping my own bullshit in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's really what they're coming for. And yes, there's other practical things, like you need to be good at what you do, practically speaking. Like if you don't know how to cook and you're trying to like teach cooking and whatever, you kind of get what I'm saying with that. But it's, how has your perspective, now that this is part of what you do and you're channeling all this stuff, Do you look at your past through a different lens? I don't know if you looked at it bad or negative or positive, like how, like obviously not fun things happened, but in this process, and that you being able to like make this type of content or host these types of spaces, has it shifted your perspective on your past?
Yeah, I think, I mentioned this with the Buddhism of there not really being good things or bad things, just what is, or something I tell people a lot when they can't make a decision is that there's no right or wrong path, there's just the path that you walk. And I think I would say that, of course, it would have been nice to have a more comfortable life, or even, to have a more comfortable life moving forward. But I think it does give me an advantage to have a deep and visceral understanding of human suffering,
Mm.
because I am a more creative problem solver for my clients who come to me with unusual problems because I have lived experience similar to theirs. Like, I think what really got me started was seeing that all the sales and marketing coaches were telling us to be manipulative and to create scarcity, urgency, and security. And I'm on the autism spectrum, and so are most of my clients. We don't do that. We can't do that. It makes us nauseous. That is, some people, talk about like an autistic sense of justice. Like, if something is morally wrong in my body, I can't do it. And so I had to find a different way to sell, because every single sales guy was telling me this. And so I realized if I had to figure it out for me, I had to figure it out for someone else. I came up with automations because I have a disability. It turns out other people with disabilities or people who just got pregnant are coming to me and saying, how do I automate parts of my business on the days I can't show up? So what is cool is the hardships I've had and the solutions I've had to develop for those hardships actually serve so many other people. And one of my things I always say is that I'm an open source human. Like, if you like any of my ideas, you are free to take them and run with them and build upon them. None of it should be gate kept in my mind. And the only thing I really charge for is my time and attention to solve a problem with you in real time. But if you want to solve it on your own, like, I have pollinated those resources out in the world, and they're there for you if you need them. Just because I truly do want everyone to win. And I don't think that there's any reason why any person should not be allowed to have access to the resources to build something amazing. So if I have a resource, I'm never going to keep it from someone else, except for, limited time and attention and energy. But, I'm trying my best to just elevate anybody who wants to solve problems like what I solve. If that, yeah,
It
I
makes
guess
sense. Well, there's two things that came to mind. I like the open source human. Is that what you just said? Or open source problem solver, something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I love the open source. Well, to that, it lends itself a little bit to what I was bringing up before. Like, it's never really information problems that people are running into. There's infinite amount of information. Like, you could type into Chat GPT right now, it's going to spit out an answer. It'll like comb all of the internet for you. That's a whole other ball of wax. I don't even want to go down that, because I can't. I'm afraid
You
to
do
even
another
start
episode about AI.
that. I can barely wrap my head around. I tell my friend, I went to the website once. He's big in tech stuff. He understands. I ask him, I'm like, dude, with kid gloves, tell me what's going on here. Because I'm like that 70-year-old grandma who's like, if I push one button on my iPhone, I'm going to break the whole thing. Like, that's my vibes around it. Like, am I going to upload my consciousness into the interwebs? And then, like, am I going to be the start of the Matrix? Like, what's going on here? That's another thing. But coming back to the statement at hand, it's not so much an information problem. It's all out there for free. And what I'm finding is it kind of what you're saying. Like, people are paying for your attention, more or less paying for somebody to give a shit and to house the conversation and to quell the fears and like, no, I've been there, I get it, that's normal. Like, normalizing the pain. Like, this is
Or
part
saying,
of.
yes, you're allowed to do that. Like, I feel like 50% of my job is giving people permission.
Sounds crazy, but that's the one side of it's like, what the hell is going on here? But I think the other side of this, if we look at it, I think the positive side, personally, again, no good or bad, but I think what's illuminating here is people are now having to pay, and pay handsomely, for a relationship. It means this is an investment, where I think we've dispensed that over the past whatever .com boom and social media, the way that's all gone. I think this is lending itself now, because there's too much, there's going to be this, perhaps too much of a pivot back towards like, well, how do we curate deeper relationships? We have to invest deeper into a few people,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be more, I think people are going to become more discerning. Well, what am I really looking for in
Mm-hmm.
this person? What's the type of conversation they want? What are some of the real authentic experiences that they had?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to be able to like look them in the eye and be like, yo, let's go on this journey together. I think that's a cool thing you brought out there. And I think a lot of people are afraid to admit, like, I just want to pay somebody to talk to. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. I'll go do the work. Once I feel valued and seen and heard, I'll go do the work. I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of folks don't have people in their peer group who they can talk to about some of these things. Like I have a friend in Australia who met with me yesterday because none of his other friends are entrepreneurs. And so he's like, can I just talk through my business plan with you? Because you're the only person I can talk to. And it was great. It was a lovely coaching session between friends. And, I'll probably hire him as my fitness coach at some point. But it's like, it's the quality of attention, but it's also, I think, the lens that we can offer. People come to me because they do want permission to do things differently, but they want the data behind how to strategize. And that, I have, because I don't wouldn't call them mistakes, but I've just had so many hypotheses and learned so many things on the edge of what's been done. And so they want to know, like, what have you seen out there?
Well, curated and personalized experience is what I heard. And what you're saying, they're like, you understand me. You've done all this stuff, which is all things that maybe are intriguing to me. Hey, can you help simplify this so
Mhm.
that I just like know the next step and it lines up and it's good for me? That's, I love that. When it comes to entrepreneurism, which is another ism, but like, what drew you to that specifically as opposed to, the typical 9 to 5, go get a job, that kind of bit? What drew you to that as a pursuit?
I would say I've tried working for other people and I never enjoy it very much. My last job was my dream job. I was like, wow, I really did it. I made it. I was a technical support engineer for this like startup, and the CEO was like younger than me and like some 41, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then it turns out it was just another corporation. And the thing that I don't love about corporations is that they sort of what I guess maybe I'll put it this way. What I don't like for working about most people is they give me a job title and they think that's all I can do. So if you hire me as a technical support engineer, you don't give a crap about my content marketing background. You won't even let me have a meeting with the marketing department to share what I understand about viral marketing and pattern interrupt and opportunities that we're not getting that even relate to technical support and how I could, improve our knowledge base and like create videos. And so I find that people want me to stay in my lane a bit too much. And I don't have lanes. I'm not good at that. I'm a very dynamic individual who is always learning things. And I have a wealth of experience and talents that if you don't let me use all of them, I start to feel unwell. And so when I got laid off this last time in Oregon State, they'll give you all of your unemployment basically as a business grant. And so they gave me $25,000 to start my business. And so I did. And I didn't have to apply for jobs. I just
Did it?
was approved for unemployment and then started my business. And I've done that a few times before, but I feel like I was in a mental health space this time to finally be consistent and to have overcome a lot of my self-sabotaging behaviors, which made it harder to be an entrepreneur in the past. Um, I read a really great book by Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap that helped me
Yes.
address my upper limit problems that were preventing me from being a successful entrepreneur. And now having that awareness of those things I tend to do helped me get out of my own way. And I will also say becoming a parent makes me a lot less interested in tying my own shoelaces together because I have to keep moving for her, if that makes sense.
I think that I do. I've talked to a lot of parents. My wife and I want to start our family this year, but time and again, I hear people say like it made them a better business owner because it's beyond just them. They had to start thinking. They had to become a better leader. Essentially, it's like, oh my god, it's not just me. Like, especially if you've gone through some shit,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, if it all goes to hell, like I'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know if those dependents that are relying on you are going to be fine. That's an extra variable. So that's
Mhm.
wow.
And also the time constraint of I can only work between 8 and 5. Can't work after that. And so
Mm.
before I was like, well, I'll get it done someday. And now I'm like, this has to get done by 3 p.m. today because we are going to gymnastics tonight. And so I think that limitation on time has made me be more effective with the time I do have back when I had compared to when I had an abundance.
Mm. Which seems counterintuitive. You're going to give me more limitations, but I'm going to become a better producer. That's it's almost like the starving artist. Like I need to feel like I'm the starving artist so that I can create my masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it that way. Out of curiosity, part of this taking this big leap, which love the book,
Mm-hmm.
the upper limit stuff, I highly recommend anybody who's listening. Could you, what if you feel comfortable sharing any of these things around like what was these upper limit self-sabotage things that were holding you back specifically from literally just saying like, you know what, I'm just gonna do my own thing. What did that center around for you?
I think the big one for me and something that comes up for my clients a lot is loyalty. One of the upper limit problems they talk about is if you grew up poor, if all your friends are poor, especially if you're like queer, anti-capitalist artist, you're like money is evil, you know. And so I had the whole story of like, only bad people make money. You can only make money by tricking people. I don't want money because it's like more punk to like be poor. And then I realized it's actually more punk to like take rich people's money if they want to give it to you and then spend it on art and like queer community projects. And so I think for me, it was a loyalty of like money bad, we're better than people with money. And I didn't want to like betray like the punk queer art side of myself. And now I've just found that it actually empowers my punk queer community if I do have enough resources.
Mm-hmm.
So that was big. And the other one was I was afraid that if I did achieve success, that I wouldn't be able to maintain it and that I would fail. I have a history of mental health and substance complications in my early 20s, and so I didn't have a lot of faith in my ability to be consistent. But as stated, having a child is very good for establishing routines, establishing accountability, staying off of substances. And so that helped me, I think, slowly build enough trust in myself to believe that I wasn't going to burn it all down if I built it in the first place. So I think those are the two ones for me.
Wow. Appreciate you sharing that. What the irony, and it kind of sounds like what was really cool about your own spiritual journey, especially dipping into Buddhism, the non-attachment, non-good, bad, the irony of like an old identity around money. If I am this good, if I am this, I am bad.
Mm-hmm.
I won't let myself step into that. So I literally won't do the behaviors that allows me to like leap the barrier, take the big leap.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's cool until we confront those types of things and find a way for it to be nuanced enough for us to understand like, well, how does this actually fit into my identity? How am I going to interface with my world that
Mm-hmm.
still feels authentic? And again, with like sitting about habits, do I trust myself to be consistent enough with any of these things? And we got to kind of try it on and say like, how does this work? I need to shift this way. That was, I appreciate you sharing that because I think whether somebody's already an entrepreneur, but somebody's like thinking about taking that on, most of the people listen to this are business owners. Um, but some of them have also not taken the leap to like, I'm really committed to my business.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is still a bit of a hobby, just a little bit of gig work. I'm not ready to go all in on me. I think entrepreneurship is a highly spiritual pursuit. It is a very creative expression of like, these are all the hats I can wear. How do I put it together in a way that we're going to have a meaningful exchange of value and services and money and as part of that kind of exchange of trust. I think what you were saying there about shifting and understanding who you are in that identity, taking that leap and going all in on yourself. Once you get like understanding around that, once you know yourself enough, trust yourself enough. As you said before, the year ahead It reminded me a little bit
Oh,
of
the
like
scripting thing. Yeah. Where
scripting.
you start
Yes.
imagining standing on the other side and being like, wow, I'm so glad that I decided to invest in my business. It turned out so well. Um, those sorts of things.
Well, I think the most powerful statement in just that scripting is I am. I am, and it's part of I am. It's my identity. I did invest. I did these things. What were the behaviors that fall in line with my future self that I hope to be? Um, the subtleties of the practical aspect of that is like that's where people get taught like, oh, I'm gonna say what are they called? Affirmations into a mirror and do all that. It's like, yeah, you got to get used to saying I am.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am this thing, and then one day it's just like, oh yeah, I am this thing because I did the behaviors that fall in. Like, no big deal,
Mm-hmm.
no big deal. It's gone. Wow, wow, you're pretty awesome. I'm appreciating your stories
Thank
here
you.
because I find I have whether I agree with somebody's business or not or any of the stuff. No matter what, anybody who takes a shot at like, I'm going to take full responsibility, win or lose, and especially if you're in it long enough, everybody kind of comes to a similar conclusion. So like, all right, I get it. I just respect like, hey, you had the guts to go do it. Like you believe differently. You believe there's a better way. Cool, prove it.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to say it's on me.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Wow.
Yeah, I was just talking with someone last night about how part of what motivates me is anger. I was angry that they laid me off because I was like, "Oh, you think I'm so worthless? You can just flush me down the toilet? Like, watch what I can do." So that fueled a lot of it. And then as I got into sales and marketing, I got angry that there weren't resources for creative thinking outside the box marketing. I got angry that they were making money telling people to do things that I thought were morally wrong. And so that anger was why I started making so much content about it, because it was just exploding out of me because I was so upset. And so I was working with my coach last night on like shadow work and how to use the things that activate you or frustrate you effectively, rather than being like, oh, anger is a bad emotion, I don't ever want to be angry. It's like, well, this is an anger that is actually very productive. So how do I not eat myself alive with it, but utilize it as fuel to keep going on the days that I'm like, why am I even doing this? It's like, because I want to help, you know?
I love that you shared that, and it reiterated something that um, I had a powerful revelation around. I think I want to just piggyback off that for a second, and I'd also like to get your feedback. I, for a long time, thought that hate and anger were the same thing, and I conflated those two things. Very brief backstory: I had a business fallout, and a lot of my stuff in my life was fueled out of spite and hate. And yes, anger was in that. And my buddy, who was my second business partner, one day pulled me aside. I was like, dude, I'm not worried about you when when you're in anger mode. What I'm worried about is what happens when you're no longer angry. Essentially, like when you got a couple bucks in your pocket, things are okay, like things are good. And he was right, because the second that was gone, I was still like, it was all hate fueled. And what I eventually
Mm,
realized was it was self hatred.
mm,
Um, that was a hard revelation to come through. That was part of the Naked Sunday revelations. Um, but when I recently understood that anger was not a bad thing, it was more like igniter fluid to say, like, let's get the lift off on this project.
mhm,
Use that, but you ground it in a place of love. Like, I'm doing this from a place of like self love and also love of like supporting others. Truly, truly. And it can't like also even the love of whoever pissed me off, because they provided the lens for me to discover a new space to enter and
mhm,
also fuel enough courage to say I'm going to go take that shot. Um,
mhm,
for me, that was liberating because I suppressed my anger for a long time because I didn't like how it made me feel. Like last time I got angry, trashed a bunch of relationships. Don't want to do that again. So
mhm.
like I'd be curious on any of your feedback on that or any of your takeaways from that. I heard you say some similar stuff like shadow work and things like that with your own coach. Um, I'm just curious on your takeaways there.
Yeah, well, yeah, bringing up the coaching thing, and shadow work. Yeah, I have some. I'm going to do some writing around the term shadow work and my feelings around that. But I've had a lot of really good experiences with diving into the concept of shadow work with a couple different books. There's one called Existential Kink, and it's about how we manufacture suffering that's familiar to us. That is an incredible book. I recommend it. I believe Carolyn Elliott is the author. And then Romancing the Shadow, and it talks about all the archetypes and all the shadow versions of those archetypes, and you can sort of start to see where you show up in those ways. And I became aware of the things that I was almost doing behind my back to express a part of myself that was very real. Like, I'm a very controlling person. I can be extremely cruel if I want to. I see vulnerabilities everywhere. And if I don't give those parts of myself a place to exist in a healthy way, they will find their own way to come out. And I think anger is one of them that comes out when I feel scared. And so, in a way, I think I was scared because I got laid off. I was scared. And so it turned into anger as a protector. And at times, I think I told you I have this like too tight of a grip on my business. And I think that is fear based. When I can't stop working, when I can't stop obsessing, when I'm coming up with 45 new offers, it's all coming from fear. And so I think there can be sort of like a warrior's clarity with that energy that I'm trying to cultivate. But I mean, being an entrepreneur is scary, and I do have to notice and not judge, but notice when I'm getting angry too much or irritable. What am I really afraid of? And I think it's failure. Because being an entrepreneur for at least in the first couple of years and maybe forever is very, um, what's the word? It's unstable. Like sometimes I have like a 20K month and sometimes I have like a 0K month, and sometimes I have a couple 0K months. And then I'm like, well, you know, so it's, you have to be able to tolerate that uncertainty to make it as an entrepreneur, which is very hard. But the thing I wanted to say about the coaching last night that I'm really enjoying is they asked us to think of a person who upsets us. And the person who upsets me the most is Tucker Carlson. And I realized I'm mad at him because I want a platform as big as his to do my work on that scale. And I'm mad that he has that big of a platform and he does that with it. He lies to people openly. He manipulates the public. He takes money. Like, I don't know how, maybe some people listening to this love Tucker Carlson. I can't stand what he does with the amount of power and influence that he does. And so in that exercise with them, I realized like I need to prioritize more speaking engagements. I need to build that platform. I can sit here and be grumpy and jealous, or I can mobilize and start to build a platform that rivals his. And I think the great thing about absurdity and play in business and sort of the whole like sacred clown fool archetype is you can really get away with a lot in this life. And most people think you can't, but you really can. Like if you're bold enough to go for something that only three people are going to ever try to do, you might make it. And I think that is something I've bet on a lot, is that, weird wins, absurd wins, trying something that no one would be silly enough to try can be a great business strategy.
Well, especially like how do you actually get business in this life when ultimately there's only so many different businesses? Like, there's these categories. You have to be different in some way, shape, or form, which means you have to dare to walk away from what the crowd is doing. What I appreciated in your revelation there around that shadow work is, whether it's fueled from a place of I don't like what's going on here and I despise what's happening, I find like, okay, there's an appreciation. What's the thing? And I heard like a practice of non-attachment. It was like, okay, cool. And I think a lot of people can take something from that. I'm just saying from my own personal experiences, when I operated from the jealousy, the anger, but really the hate. I don't have this. I feel like I'm less than. It was a place of scarcity, lack. You brought up a great thing before. When I feel scarcity, I'm going to create 1,000 new offers. What's going to hit? Like, yeah, sure. But did you really do it from a place of like, if money was good right now and I was in a great place, is this really the right offer? And am I going to properly serve? The answer is usually no. Go
Mhm.
back to the thing that really works and what's really grounded. What do you really care about? What do you really want to do? No, well, as you said, you're like, I'm going to go have more priorities, more of this thing that I really say I care about.
Mhm.
Oh, cool. And I had a friend who said, um, pain, and perhaps anger is part of that, like you're saying that, or fear. Pain is, she was on the podcast saying this a couple of weeks ago, um, is essentially teaching us something about our values.
Mm.
So if we look at that, like I see it that way. If you couldn't tell, like most of my platform is like learn how to love yourself because then you'll learn how to love your enemy as well, which I think is kind of a profound, like even religious statement, like love thine enemy as you
Mhm.
would love yourself. Because if you love your enemy, whatever that means, all of a sudden, like how do they hurt you? How does anybody hurt you if you are seeing that? Because if you can see yourself in them, I think that's profoundly holy or divine or whatever you want to call it. So I appreciated your. That's not easy stuff because we
Mhm.
all have our stuff. We all have the
Totally.
things that are gonna rub up against however we fucking feel about anything,
Mhm.
and understandable. But the foresight, and I think what I also think is worth noting is you have somebody that you trust and a relationship you've invested in to help shepherd you through that moment in time. And I don't think enough people think about getting the right environment, like you said before, about like people just don't even have like a social circle they could even talk about,
Mhm.
but having the right people when tragedy or crisis or friction or anger or whatever volatile thing gets injected into your life, is your system capable of handling it?
Mhm.
Do you have strategies in place? Like, who do I go talk to first before I go, just to do some checking in? I think that's important. Same notion as like a rainy day fund or fill the well before the drought, all the
Mhm.
same shit. Like, because who knows? Something could have pissed you off, and all of a sudden you do all those things that would just literally nuke your bottom line and stop you from growing the business or your platforms or whatever it is that you really truly like 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long, if it's part of your like your life long journey. People forget these immediate like short-term anger moves, scarcity moves, often sacrifices their long-term goals. And they just needed somebody, if they had taken the time to acknowledge that they needed that relationship, to cultivate it, to go deeper with that when things were not even bad, when things were just good, to say, I know for the next leg of this journey, I need to stay focused. How do I do that? So I appreciated that because I think that's something that anybody listening to here, especially if you're a business owner, when all the burdens lie on your shoulders. If
Mhm.
you're a leader of your family, all the burdens still lie on your shoulders. Having those people in place to help you walk that line authentically to yourself, I think it's really valuable. So I appreciated you just sharing that whole story around that. But yeah, that was awesome.
It makes me think about how with a lot of in my physical health world, I have like a team. I have a physical therapist, I have a primary care doctor, I have a prescriber, and those people are the experts I trust to guide me on this path. And I think having a team also of you could think of them as mentors or community members or whatever, but people who you can go to for guidance when you feel either lost or stuck or um, what I love about my coach is she just asks me questions I would never think to ask.
Hmm.
And so as much as I know about my stuff, she has a completely different lens and can offer me a perspective or even just a thoughtful question that I would not have arrived at on my own. And, speaking of serendipity and providence and all those things lining up, it's like that's the question I needed to be asked today because of the stuff that's swirling around in my brain. And it does provide some clarity. Because I mean, I don't know if you're this way in business, but I feel like I'm always pivoting a little bit. Um, and
Sometimes too many though. So yeah, that's why I'm laughing about it because oh man, if I didn't have a couple people to keep me on track, oh my god.
yeah,
Sorry, I
I'm
cut in
definitely
there.
I'm struggling with this like split in my business of like I know I can do this thing that will make me a lot of money that I enjoy, but it's so completely different from everything else that I'm doing. And I'm trying to find this way to make them the same thing. And I just don't know if they're going to be the same thing, but
Mhm.
that's what I have coaches for. So hopefully they'll help me find it.
Love it. I love it. I'm taking a peek at the time right now.
Mhm.
I want to be respectful of yours, and I got some other stuff coming up as well afterwards. But this has been a truly fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for all you've been sharing. I'd love for anybody who's listening right now, be like, yo, I dig what Chuck is saying. I want to hang. What would be the best way for them to connect with you?
So if you look up my socials, I'm Magical Weirdo Chuck pretty much everywhere. And if you want to know more about the like nitty gritty stuff that I do from a digital marketing standpoint, my website is identitypending.com. Right now, I'm focusing on technical SEO and content automation, but I do have a group coaching, very affordable group coaching strategy group called the Magical Weirdo Community. I write blogs. So just look up Magical Weirdo Chuck and you'll find all the things I do. And then you can click through to the things that you want.
Love that. For everybody who's listening, that's all going to be in the show notes. So if you didn't get all that, don't worry. Just go check that out. You'll be fine with it there. Uh, again, I've loved this conversation. I'm excited to see where our friendship goes. But what are some parting words of wisdom, lessons, whatever you'd like to share with the audience before you go?
Let's see. I think the closing thought that I have is something I say a lot to folks I work with is that the biggest friction point in any business is self-doubt. And so a lot of the times we won't do something because we don't trust ourselves. And I think everyone has their own path to this, but cultivating a practice that does help you build trust with yourself, or sometimes I say microdose trust with yourself, like day by day build a little bit. I would say if you learn to cultivate a faith in that tiny, tiny voice in you that knows things, and to build a good relationship with your body and that tiny voice, I think that's how you know which path to walk. And that's how I'm doing it. So I wish anybody luck who wants to try to cultivate that, I suppose.
Microdosing trust in yourself. Ooh, that'd be a fire other title for this episode. But that was good.
That might be, yeah, it might work more. It might be better for search. People are
It
probably
might
searching
be.
like
Might be.
microdosing more.
That, you're thinking there. I do love energy. Tyson, Daddy is finishing up his conversation right now. Daddy will be with you in a second. My dog is just
Oh, that's
being
funny.
like, I want to hang right now.
Oh,
He knows he owns me the second I'm on anything. But thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy and your wisdom today. Like, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I look forward to many more like this. I look forward to being on your podcast as well when I finally get my head out of my ass and actually fill out all the stuff, the intake stuff. I'm the worst when it comes to all that stuff. The second I see intake forms, I'm like, my brain just,
no, no.
I need like Google autofill or something like that for everything in my life. But anyway, thank you so much for being part of the show today. Thank you for sharing your
Yeah.
time, and looking forward to much more. Everybody go check out the show notes to connect. And until next time, I remind you, Tyson, I remind you to love every body.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to be here and talk to you soon.